Let's start with something simple and familiar. You wake up late. The morning moves fast. Coffee, maybe water, but no food. And before you know it, it's time to move. A walk, a workout, some kind of physical effort. At that moment, a quiet question appears in the background of your mind. Is this a bad idea? Most people don't even need to ask it out loud. They've already been trained to believe the answer. Exercise without eating feels irresponsible, risky, like driving on empty. But what if that instinct isn't biology? What if it's habit? Because the human body does not operate on the same rules we repeat socially. It operates on signals. Internal assessments. Continuous calculations about energy availability and safety. And one of the most important signals your body constantly evaluates is not what you just ate, but what energy is already available and whether it is safe to release it. That distinction changes everything. The most common assumption about exercise is also one of the most misleading, that the meal you eat right before training is what powers the workout. In reality, human physiology doesn't work on that timeline. When you eat, digestion begins a slow, methodical process. Food can remain in the stomach for hours before nutrients even reach the bloodstream. Absorption continues gradually, long after that. This system is designed for steady energy management, not instant fuel delivery. So when you begin exercising, the energy your muscles rely on was not created by the meal you just ate. It was already there, stored, waiting. To understand what happens when you exercise while fasting, you first need to understand how the body stores energy. There are two primary storage systems. The first is glycogen, glucose stored in the liver and muscles. Glycogen is your body's most accessible energy source. It is fast, efficient, and easy to mobilize. The average adult carries enough glycogen to support many hours of moderate physical activity. The second system is body fat. Even individuals who appear lean carry tens of thousands of calories stored as fat. This is not emergency fuel. It is a central feature of human survival biology. Fat exists to keep the body functional when food intake is inconsistent. Now here's the key point most people never learn. Your body does not choose fuel based on preference. It chooses fuel based on convenience and safety. As long as glycogen is abundant and insulin levels are elevated from frequent eating, your metabolism stays in glucose mode. Fat remains locked away not because it's harmful, but because it isn't needed yet. Over time, this creates a subtle imbalance. When the body is rarely required to access fat, it becomes less practiced at doing so. The metabolic pathways still exist, but they are underused. This is why many people feel uncomfortable or unstable when they skip meals, not because they lack energy, but because their metabolism is no longer fluent in switching fuels. This is where fasting changes the internal message. After roughly 12 to 16 hours without food, glycogen stores begin to decline, not disappear but thin enough to change priorities. When that happens, the body reassesses the situation, and it does not panic. It adapts. Fat cells begin releasing fatty acids into the bloodstream. The liver converts a portion of those fatty acids into ketones, an alternative fuel that both muscles and the brain can use efficiently. This shift is not extreme. It is not artificial. It is a normal biological response that humans relied on for most of evolutionary history. The ability to move smoothly between burning glucose and burning fat is known as metabolic flexibility. A metabolically flexible system does not require constant feeding to remain stable. It adjusts to conditions. But modern eating patterns, frequent meals, refined carbohydrates, constant insulin signaling mean many people rarely experience that adjustment. So when they finally do, it feels unfamiliar, even threatening. Exercising while fasting introduces that signal deliberately. And when that signal appears, internal chemistry changes quickly. Insulin levels fall, and that matters more than most people realize. Insulin is not a fat-burning hormone, it is a storage hormone. When insulin is elevated, fat is effectively locked inside fat cells. When insulin drops, that lock loosens. Stored fat becomes accessible. This is why aerobic exercise performed in a fasted state consistently shows higher rates of fat oxidation compared to the same exercise done after eating, not because you try harder, but because the conditions allow it. At the same time, another hormone rises, growth hormone. Growth hormone plays two important roles here. It supports the release of stored energy from fat, and it helps protect muscle tissue from breakdown. Fasting increases growth hormone. Exercise increases growth hormone. Together, the signal is amplified. This is one of the reasons many people are surprised to discover that fasted exercise does not automatically lead to muscle loss. From a biological perspective, muscle is valuable tissue. It allows movement, work, and survival. When energy is limited, the body prioritizes preserving muscle while drawing fuel from fat. This is not a loophole. It is design. And once you understand that design, exercising without eating stops sounding reckless and starts making physiological sense. Once the body shifts fuel sources, the effects do not stay limited to that workout. They carry forward. One of the most important downstream effects of exercising while fasted is a change in how the body responds to insulin. Insulin sensitivity refers to how efficiently cells respond when insulin is present. When sensitivity is high, a small amount of insulin moves glucose into muscle cells effectively. When sensitivity is low, the body must release larger and larger amounts of insulin to achieve the same result. Over time, low insulin sensitivity creates a predictable pattern: blood sugar swings, energy crashes, increased fat storage, and a growing dependence on frequent meals just to feel stable. Fasted exercise interrupts that pattern at a fundamental level. When you train without eating, insulin levels are already low, yet muscle cells still require energy to contract. To meet this demand, muscles increase their ability to absorb glucose from the bloodstream with minimal insulin involvement. In practical terms, your muscles become more efficient at using what is already available. This improvement does not disappear when the workout ends. Studies show that insulin sensitivity can remain elevated for hours after exercise. This means that when you eat later in the day, your body is more likely to direct incoming glucose toward glycogen replenishment in muscle rather than storing it as fat. The same meal produces a different metabolic outcome. This is one reason fasted exercise can influence body composition even when total calories remain unchanged. But metabolism is only part of the story. Many people notice something else when they move in a fasted state: a shift in mental clarity. Not jittery energy, not anxiety, but a calm, focused alertness. This response is not psychological optimism. It is rooted in neurochemistry. As fasting progresses, the liver increases the production of ketones from fat. Ketones cross the blood-brain barrier efficiently and provide a steady fuel source for the brain. Unlike glucose, which can fluctuate rapidly, ketones offer consistency. At the same time, both fasting and exercise increase norepinephrine, a neurotransmitter associated with alertness, attention, and responsiveness. From an evolutionary perspective, this makes sense. When food is scarce, the brain becomes more focused, not less. Together, these changes explain why many people feel mentally sharper during fasted movement. However, not all types of exercise respond the same way under fasted conditions. Fuel context matters. Low to moderate intensity aerobic activity relies heavily on fat oxidation. Activities such as brisk walking, steady cycling, light jogging, or easy swimming align well with fasted physiology. These movements reinforce fat access, metabolic flexibility, and hormonal balance without overwhelming the system. This is where fasted exercise tends to feel smooth and sustainable. High-intensity exercise tells a different story. Sprinting, HIIT, and maximal effort intervals depend heavily on glycogen. When glycogen is already reduced due to fasting, performance can feel compromised, especially early on. This does not mean fasted high-intensity training is impossible. It means adaptation takes time. Some individuals regain high-intensity capacity after weeks of metabolic adaptation as fat utilization and mitochondrial efficiency improve. But forcing intensity too early often leads to fatigue rather than benefit. Adaptation rewards patience. Resistance training occupies a middle ground. You can lift weights in a fasted state. Neural drive and growth hormone help support the session, but recovery becomes the deciding factor. Muscle repair requires amino acids. Training fasted and delaying protein intake for too long removes the raw materials needed for rebuilding. In practice, this means fasted resistance training works best when followed by timely nutrition. This brings us to an important clarification. Fasted exercise is not about deprivation. It is about timing and signaling. It introduces a temporary state of low energy availability that teaches the body to respond efficiently. When applied occasionally and intentionally, it strengthens metabolic control rather than undermining it. But context always matters. Certain individuals should not experiment with fasted exercise without professional guidance. Pregnancy and breastfeeding increase nutritional demand. A history of eating disorders alters how fasting signals are processed psychologically. Insulin-dependent diabetes introduces complexity in blood glucose regulation. Some medications require food to be taken safely. Even in healthy individuals, the body provides clear feedback. Persistent dizziness, confusion, nausea, or heart palpitations that do not resolve with rest are not signs of adaptation, they are signals to stop. Fasted exercise should feel controlled, not punishing. When used correctly, its greatest benefit is not calorie burn. It is resilience. A metabolically flexible body handles missed meals, early mornings, long workdays, travel, and stress without panic. Energy remains stable. Focus remains available. Recovery remains possible. That resilience carries over into every other aspect of health. At this point, the physiology should be clear. Exercising while fasted does not drain the body by default. It changes which internal systems are being used. The real question is no longer whether fasted exercise works. The real question is how to use it without creating unnecessary stress. This is where most advice online breaks down. Some people frame fasted training as a miracle solution. Others treat it as dangerous under all circumstances. Both extremes miss the same point. Context determines outcome. Fasted exercise is not meant to replace all fed training. It is meant to expand your metabolic range. Think of it as teaching your body to function under slightly imperfect conditions without panic. That requires restraint. The most effective way to apply fasted exercise is intermittently. 1 or 2 sessions per week are often enough to reinforce metabolic flexibility in most people. These sessions work best when intensity is low to moderate and recovery is prioritized afterward. Walking is one of the most underappreciated tools here. A brisk walk in a fasted state encourages fat oxidation, improves insulin sensitivity, and places minimal strain on the nervous system. It is sustainable, repeatable, and low risk. Cycling at an easy pace, light jogging, or steady swimming follow the same principle. These movements tell the body energy is available internally, and it is safe to use it. That signal is powerful. High-intensity exercise requires more caution. Sprints, HIIT, and heavy interval training place a high demand on glycogen and the nervous system. Performing these workouts fasted is not inherently harmful, but it should be done selectively. If performance drops sharply, recovery suffers, or motivation declines, that is feedback, not weakness. In many cases, high-intensity sessions perform better with at least partial fueling. This does not negate the value of fasted exercise. It simply respects specificity. Resistance training follows a similar rule. You can lift weights while fasted, especially if sessions are shorter and volume is controlled. Neural drive and growth hormones support performance, but muscle repair still depends on nutrition afterward. Protein intake after training becomes non-negotiable. Fasted exercise should never be paired with prolonged underfeeding. That combination turns a useful signal into chronic stress. And chronic stress changes the hormonal picture entirely. Cortisol rises, recovery slows, sleep quality suffers, muscle retention becomes more difficult. Fat loss may stall or reverse. These outcomes are not failures of fasting. They are failures of context management. The body adapts best to temporary stress, followed by recovery. That pattern exists everywhere in biology. Exercise itself is stress. Fasting is stress. Sleep is recovery. Nutrition is recovery. When stress outweighs recovery, adaptation stops. Understanding this is what separates intelligent use from blind imitation. There are also situations where fasted exercise should not be used at all. Pregnancy and breastfeeding increase baseline energy demands. A history of eating disorders changes how fasting signals are processed mentally and emotionally. Insulin-dependent diabetes adds complexity to blood sugar regulation. Certain medications require food to be taken safely. Ignoring these realities is not discipline. It is misapplied ideology. Listening to your body does not mean guessing. It means recognizing patterns. If fasted exercise leaves you feeling stable, focused, and recovered, it is likely serving you. If it produces persistent dizziness, irritability, poor sleep, or declining performance, it is no longer a tool, it is noise. And noise is not adaptation. When used correctly, the value of fasted exercise goes beyond fat loss. It builds confidence in your physiology. Confidence that your energy does not vanish when meals are delayed. Confidence that your metabolism can adapt to real life. Confidence that stress does not automatically equal damage. That confidence changes behavior. You stop eating out of fear. You stop training out of guilt. You start making decisions based on understanding. And that is the deeper benefit. Fasted exercise reminds the body of something it already knows, but has forgotten in a world of constant availability. Energy can come from within. Stability does not require perfection. Adaptation is built, not forced. If this framework helps you see exercise and nutrition differently, less rigid, more intelligent, then subscribe to the channel. Our goal is not to tell you what to do. Our goal is to show you how the system works, so you can decide. Because health is not about extremes. It is about control. There is one more layer to fasted exercise that is rarely discussed, yet quietly influential. It has nothing to do with calories, fat loss, or even hormones. It has to do with the nervous system. Every time you eat before activity, you reinforce a pattern. Movement requires external input. Energy comes from outside. Readiness depends on consumption. Over time, this pattern shapes expectation. The nervous system begins to associate safety, performance, and stability with constant availability. When food is delayed, the system reacts, not with calm assessment, but with urgency. Hunger is interpreted as threat rather than information. Fasted exercise interrupts that association. By moving the body in a state of temporary scarcity and discovering that nothing collapses, you send a different message upstream. The system is capable. This is not about willpower. It is about recalibration. The nervous system learns that internal energy can be mobilized without panic, that physical output does not immediately require external rescue, that discomfort does not automatically mean danger. Over time, this reduces background stress. Cortisol responses become more proportional. Minor physiological fluctuations are no longer treated as emergencies. The body stays regulated longer under imperfect conditions. This is why many people report an unexpected sense of calm after fasted movement, not euphoria, but steadiness. That steadiness carries forward. It changes how you respond to missed meals, long meetings, travel days, early mornings, or disruptions in routine. Instead of urgency, there is tolerance. Instead of anxiety, there is assessment. From a systems perspective, this is adaptive resilience. Importantly, this does not mean ignoring hunger or pushing through extremes. Hunger remains a signal, but it becomes a neutral signal, not a trigger. The difference is subtle but powerful. When hunger no longer dictates immediate behavior, eating becomes more intentional. You eat because it serves recovery, nourishment, and performance, not because the nervous system is demanding relief. This is where many people misunderstand fasted exercise. They think its value lies in how much fat it burns. In reality, some of its most meaningful effects lie in how it restores trust between the body and the brain. Trust that energy can be accessed when needed. Trust that the system is not fragile. Trust that signals can be interpreted rather than obeyed reflexively. That trust reduces friction across the entire health process. Training becomes less reactive. Nutrition becomes less emotional. Rest becomes more effective. And none of this requires doing fasted exercise all the time. It requires doing it enough to change the signal. Used sparingly and intelligently, fasted exercise becomes a form of nervous system training, one that reinforces self-regulation rather than dependence. This is why its long-term value cannot be measured only in body composition. It shows up in how calmly the system responds when conditions are not perfect. And that, ultimately, is what real health looks like.